Welcome inside another episode of Points of the Passer After Dark. Jonathan, we are late previewing Maui, but late nights in Hawaii we've come very familiar with since this past weekend, staying up at 12:30 in the morning when I landed at RDU and texting you, and I think I made it to about 2 o'clock before I passed out. How late did you make that Hawaii game?
I watched the whole thing just like I said I wasn't going to.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah.
And here's the thing. I fully intended on not watching it. It would have been the right decision for me, honestly, because I don't know how I think I even tweeted out. I don't know how folks like our guy Miroslav, who's in Ukraine, who watches every game in the middle of the night, either usually he's already up. Either he's able to watch it during a work shift or um I imagine like even like getting up, but most of the time he's already up. So I have a lot of respect for him. So he for 14 years, so he's watched every game. He has not missed a game. We're talking about like Tuesday
Yeah.
night zombie
Wow.
Raycom games in like sleepy Atlanta or somewhere, and he's locked in. I love the commitment. I did once, and he's like, "Yeah, welcome to my world every once in 4 years." I did once, and I was just dying the next day.
Yeah. Hey,
Um,
old age will do that, right?
yeah, there's definitely that piece of it. Like this is 40. This is real. But the other part was how I got to that point was like, well, maybe if I can just stay up, I want to see the beginning of the Duke Arizona game because I wanted to see what Caleb was going to do against
Yeah.
Duke. And then it's halftime. Now I'm locked in for the entire game. Next thing I know, it's 12:30. I was like, well, I'm already here. Might as well
Got to do it.
let it roll. I'm glad I watched it just for the
Yeah.
experience of doing it live, but um, I was happy with how we played overall. I think there's some folks who may disagree, and we're hoping for a maybe more complete victory. But I think given the circumstances against Hawaii, we can get more into it. But there were some good things, and just being able to acclimate to the time change, especially to be able to get your legs under you, get a
Hmm.
game under you, I think is a big deal. But uh, yeah, so that was definitely an experience from the fan point because I actually did not stay up 8 years ago when they played last. So this is my first time doing something like that, I think.
Good for you. Just like the fact that you came to Kansas, I'm very proud. Proud for a moment that each time you say you're not going to do something, you've been doing it for UNC.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing that happened was as soon as actually the game had not ended, there were 4 minutes left, and my son woke up. So I was actually up until like 3:30 trying to get him to get back to sleep. It's like I kind of did that to myself, but um, and then I went back and watched the last 4 minutes because like I can't just leave it hanging now.
Right, right.
Gotta know what happened.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, pretty good showing in Hawaii. Again, good to get the legs under the team and get adapted to the time change and just get a game under their belt. So, as we started out Maui today, I know you've been pretty locked in. I've been doing a lot of travel today, hence the late pod. But what are some of the highlights that you saw? Obviously, the big news is UConn going down. The bigger news might be Dan Hurley finally getting called for a technical. We'll circle back to that in a moment, but good win for Penny Hardaway and Memphis. Right now, as we're recording, we got the Auburn and Iowa State game on, but where do you want to start? I imagine it might be a little Danny Hurley.
Yeah, we can start there. That's fine. I mean, even going to the media day yesterday, where you have the beautiful backdrop of the ocean and the island right there in Maui, and everybody just looks relaxed. Hurley never looks completely relaxed, actually, to be honest. Like there's a little bit of
Focused.
him that's just like
Yeah,
stirring, a little
yeah,
restless. Um, but like it's the most relaxing backdrop. And then juxtapose that with him just 3 minutes into the game, just losing his mind.
completely.
And I know we talked last year about the fact that this was something he was working on, was he recognized that it was over the top, that he had an anger problem,
Hmm.
and that it was actually hurting his team at times. So that he got into meditation, he got into painting, and so this is where I want to go with it is at this point, based on what I saw today, you need to fire your art instructor and you need to fire your guru, dude. Like that is
You
not
need to
working
paint
for you.
more because you've not
Oh,
been painting.
that, yeah, I mean, it's something, it's not working. It's not
Yeah,
working right now. And I don't know if it's because he knows kind of that he's on the stage, right? That Maui, even though
yeah,
it's a small gym, like Cameron, like we've talked about, uh, but it's a big stage in terms of the entire college basketball world is watching. So does he play it up? But honestly, I just think this is him. I think it's him. And to your
Mhm.
point, I'm glad they finally called it. Now, there's some folks who are like, well, that was a soft call at the end of the game. If you're not going to call it at the beginning of the game, and I can hear that piece of it. To me, he should be called for it right from the start. I
Agreed.
don't agree with the way that the refs have been refereing him and just letting him go and
Yeah,
just
it's been
just
years too.
yeah, and just letting him,
Yeah.
letting the antics ride where you don't see other coaches going to that extreme.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that he got called for it. I don't know if it cost him the game, but it definitely didn't help. And the other piece of it is like you have Samson Johnson for Connecticut getting a technical foul like right before that, and for pushing the guy over.
Hmm.
And so as disciplined as they are in terms of what they run and how they play, you see some of his personality kind of spilling over, I feel like, into the players. So those are just things that stood out to me. But in terms of the actual game itself, the game was awesome.
Yep.
I wasn't completely locked in. I kind of had it in the background, but the pieces that I saw, Memphis was fun. Memphis was fun to watch. They're
Yeah.
they're a little volatile. They're a
Yeah.
little um it feels like maybe it's going to run off the rails during the game. They're just very aggressive, but that can also come back to bite them in terms of turning the ball over, in terms of taking some ill-advised shots.
Yep.
But they hit some big shots today, especially PJ Haggerty and Tyrese Hunter. Both of them, the soft rims benefited Memphis
Yeah.
in that way. So it was fun to see, really just like that they played well, but then UConn made a heck of a comeback. They were down something like 12 points with 3 minutes left,
Hmm.
and Liam McNeely hit some big threes, freshman for them. Solo Ball hit what felt like the first. I think I texted you just an onion, like a raftery
Yeah.
onions
Yeah. There's
call
an onion
there.
emoji, but there's not a biscuit emoji. We'll have to figure that one out.
Yeah, we got to fix that. But I was glad there was an onion emoji. That felt good to send that. And he hits a huge three with 1 second left to tie it, send it to overtime. So it was just a high level basketball game. I don't think you read into it too much either way in terms of what that means for these teams down the road. But for today, it was a high level game. Uh, and credit to Penny Hardaway in Memphis for what felt like the whole thing was going to go off the rails in the offseason with some of the just the turnover, all the stuff that was happening. For them to get this win, it's huge. So I was excited to see that. And yeah, also just because of Hurley's antics, excited for them to get the loss and have to talk about it and have to face the
Yeah.
music after the game.
Yeah, it's tiring. It's
It is
it's also
exhausting.
frustrating when it's back-to-back champions and you see that kind of frustration on the sideline from him, and he's pissed off, yet he's the two-time NCAA champion. And a lot of people will say, yeah, that's tied together. It's his high energy. There are other coaches that have been successful, and you don't have to be like that. So the fact that he's up in everybody's faces with the refs and players, it definitely sometimes rubs people the wrong way, but. I guess at the same time, you can argue it sometimes gets results. So that's maybe a whole podcast for another time. But
But there's also just so many ways to
debatable.
do that. And so I agree. You don't, it
Exactly.
doesn't have to be tied to that, right? I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
I obviously John Wooden was before my time, but just what I've known, what I've seen of John Wooden and
Yeah.
Dean Smith
And you
too.
look, yeah, you look at all of Carolina lineage. There's no such thing as that kind of coach in their history. It's it's Hubert, it's Roy, it's we've never
Doherty
had Dan
breaking
Hurley.
clipboards.
I'm sure Dan Hurley has broken a clipboard every single
Oh,
practice.
he goes way beyond what Doherty would do for sure. And even I mean, Roy obviously fiery on the sidelines and would rip
Sure.
into the referees, but it's just different. It's just nonstop with Hurley, and he's essentially breaking the rules all the time. Whether it's
Yeah.
getting on the court, and there was when that push happened from Samson Johnson, Memphis staff comes out. Nolan Smith's on the Memphis staff now. They're kind of
Yeah.
like clapping that it happened, but then like, hey, let's separate. And Hurley's out there all of a sudden in the middle of the court, and it's a cash. I mean, this guy just cannot stay off the floor. So it does feel like it's at a different level. Um, it's not going away. I mean, he didn't own any of it after the loss. He
No, of
complained
course.
about the officiating, called it a joke, and that's just who he is. It's almost like he's playing a caricature of himself at this point, and
Yeah.
it's hard to know what's really him and what's just this character that he's
Yeah.
created.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, Anyway, it's nice to see UConn take that L. We'll see ultimately if we get a rematch. Hopefully we end up going toward the winners bracket and don't have to see them and worry about them. We got a big game against Dayton, but before we get into that, just a few moments to touch on the Michigan State Colorado game. Let me just say first that I feel for Colorado going to play a pissed off UConn team tomorrow. It's gonna be rough.
Yeah, that's not a great matchup, and UConn hasn't really played anybody until Memphis today, but the teams that they have played, the New Hampshires and Lemoynes of the world, they have absolutely dominated. And
Yeah,
maybe Colorado's not Lemoyne, but they don't look like they're off to a very good start this year.
right.
Even though their coach Tad Boyle's had some good teams, so this is just does not seem like it's gonna be one of them. So I agree. I think that's gonna
Yeah.
be that could be a
It
thumping
could be
tomorrow.
it could be ugly. Yeah, you
Yeah, it
might
could get
want to
ugly
take the
early.
over on it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So we'll have Michigan State and Memphis, which should be a really good matchup, honestly. See if Penny Hardaway's team can take the momentum that they've gained from that win over UConn. Definitely a winnable game against Michigan State. So as always, Maui's delivering. But let's zone in real quick on Dayton and UNC and what you see from that matchup. Obviously, a lot of positive takeaways again, mostly from the second half of the last game against Hawaii, just some real highlights there. But what do you see as some of the essentials here versus Dayton to get that first win and a big one? And of course, that first win in the tournament is always really challenging. Make sure that you don't come out slow. We've seen a little bit of that in Battle for Atlantis last year. And how do we avoid that? And what are you hoping to see tonight?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about the slow starts for this team, especially, and I didn't really see that in the same way against Hawaii, which was a good sign, especially them coming off of the time change and everything. I fully expected it to be a slow start, but we get off to a 13-2 lead in that game, so it was more sustaining that and then losing the rebound battle. Losing is kind, getting dominated on the glass in the first half of that game. So I think with Dayton, well, a couple of things. Dayton is actually physically their roster construction is more similar to us than Hawaii. So they're not as big as Hawaii overall up and down their roster. They do have a freshman who's from France who's 7'1", and he does get, I think it's around 13 minutes a game and pretty productive in those minutes. That'll be interesting to look at and see, do they go in that direction of trying to exploit our lack of size, relatively speaking, in the front court? So does Emile Letang get more time? I'm not so sure that he does, but that's just something to watch for. But they're built a lot like we are. They're actually smaller than we are.
Mhm.
Their biggest front court player, the main front court player is Zed Key. It's an Ohio State transfer, and you may recognize that name from 2 years ago. I guess it was the 22-23 season. We played Ohio State in MSG for the CBS Sports Classic, and Zed had a couple of big shots. He hit a big three with like a minute and a half left to go ahead in that game. And then that was the eventual Pete Nance kind of miracle turnaround shot to tie it to send it
Yeah,
overtime. We
yeah,
win it overtime. Um, but Zed's a big contributor for them. He's the second leading scorer. You got Enoch Cheeks, who's been anything but. He's been fantastic
what a
for
name.
Dayton.
There's so many
Yeah,
good names in college basketball this year.
yeah, and he's definitely one of them. And he was kind of a complimentary player for them last year. I mean, this was a tournament team last year who, if I remember right, beat Duquesne in the first round and loses to Arizona. Um, but he was a complimentary player when you had guys like Dayron Holmes and Kobe Brea, who's now at Kentucky, Kobe Elvis as well, who's now at Oklahoma. But Cheeks now is leading the way with 15 points a game. He's really rebounding the ball really well, around 8 rebounds a game.
Yeah,
He's not that big. He's
watch
like
out
six
for you.
three, and he's I think he's their leading rebounder. So um, so all that to say that like he's somebody to keep your eye on. He's pretty dynamic, but he's not like an elite 3-point shooter, and that's really kind of the overall theme with Dayton, where they have some guys who can really shoot it. Nate Santos, one of their other starters, is a wing, about 6'7", and he can shoot it. He shot it over 40% last year, but overall they're not, at least at this point in the season, they're much more efficient from two. So I think that's something to watch is, can we, force them to take some shots that maybe aren't the best shots for them from the outside? Can we
Right.
keep them away from the rim? And again, with the idea that they have some guys who I think can drive, can create, but they're not incredibly big. And I think we can definitely hold our own with the front court. The biggest factor to me is the difference in pace. I thought looking at them that they like to get into transition, but it's more of like a counterpunch situation where they pick their spots and go off of live ball turnovers. Cheeks is at over 3 steals a game, which is a wild number. I know it's a
Mm.
small sample size, but at this point in the season, but he's still like he's creating a lot of turnovers just by himself.
Yeah.
And they're dynamic when they get out in transition with him and Malachi Smith for the guard spots are really fun to watch. But their pace is they're well into the 200s in pace.
Right.
And that's not something I expected. And something that happened in that Arizona game last year was they kind of got caught up in running with Arizona. And I think that's something that we can do. You may see that where they try to start running with us, and that's not going to be a good idea, I would think, for Dayton. In this game, I don't think that's what that would not be
Never
a
a
good
good
game plan.
idea against UNC. It never has
No,
been.
not the way that we're
Never.
going.
Yeah.
Not the way that we're going. I mean, we're up to 6th in the country for KenPom and offensive efficiency. Our pace is like holding around like 20th, something like that in the country.
Yeah.
So we're one of the fastest teams in the country. We can really go faster. I don't think we've seen us at top speed, in part because we've been playing a lot of slower teams. Hawaii is a slower team too.
Hmm.
So that'll be interesting, that battle, kind of that chess match between Anthony Grant of Dayton, who's an excellent coach, who's been there for a while, and Hubert of who
Yeah.
controls the pace. I think that'll dictate how this game plays out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, we've been super impressed by the guard play. So I think Dayton, in my mind, at least if I had to hot take it, is might be in trouble tonight with not being as big of a team. Just when you put guards up against guards, I'll take anybody in the country with Seth Elliott and RJ running point and shooting guard right now. I'm excited to see if I can stay up for 11:30. It's been a very long day here. Been doing a lot of traveling again. That's why we're on late night. And I told Jonathan earlier today, I said, I think in the future, I'm just going to take off the days for Maui and March Madness from work, which I did this year, but I filled it in with some other travel. I think I'm just going to sit on my couch from here on anytime we're in Maui and take off that first couple of days for March Madness. That's probably the right move given the level of games and how much it's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's a pretty popular thing. I mean, I even saw something a while ago about men choosing to have a certain type of elective surgery during March Madness just because it was like a good time to be on the couch and not be able to move
Yeah.
around a
Yeah,
lot.
strategic.
Um, but hopefully you can like just enjoy it and not to have a reason to recover.
Yeah,
I like the idea of taking because it's Thanksgiving week anyway, right? Like
exactly.
especially this week
Yeah,
where
yeah.
there's a
Stretch it
holiday
out.
coming up.
Right.
Those days of work seem to kind of drag by. How much productivity really happens in most lines of work in this week,
Yeah.
unless you're somebody like John Fanta and you're covering games, and this is
And
one of your
yeah,
biggest times of the year, right? In terms of
right.
getting hyped up for Feast Week and everything else. But I'm with you. I like the idea because I mean, again, the game today, the Memphis UConn game, I think will probably be the highlight of the day. We'll see what happens in this Iowa
Yeah.
State Auburn game, but as the tournament progresses, there should be some at least a few more high level matchups and hopefully some great finishes.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that I looked up and looked at that highlight when I looked up Dan Hurley getting that techno, I said, "Oh my God, it was 92-92. Like, what a game. I need to go back
Yeah,
and rewatch that entire thing because, that kind of pace with Kansas and UNC when we were out there is one of the most exciting games. And I always reference this game back in the day of you and I's like first year of friendship. Uh, Kentucky and Carolina, Malik Monk, 103-100 loss. The most entertaining basketball game I still think I've ever watched, where he dropped what 47 or 49 points, just something ridiculous that
yeah.
game.
I think it
But
was
yeah,
47.
yeah, that kind of pace. Um, yeah, it's just fun to watch. So I'll be rewatching that one, and yeah, it'd be fun to run with Dayton tonight and see where we land. But been trusting our guard play a lot. Things I'd like to see tonight would be RJ, given that he's had a little bit more success shooting. He had a few shooting woes in the first few games. I'd like to see him kind of get back up toward his number. I sent you earlier an RJ and the heels bet on DraftKings that I
I
dropped,
love that, by the way.
which was 30 plus points and a 1 to 2 point victory. I hope for my heart's sake that I'm wrong on that, and I hope that the whole team shows up and that it's more of a blowout. But I couldn't resist putting that little parlay together.
No, I love it. I mean, I think this could be who knows, right? But I think
Yeah,
RJ started to you can see it coming. Like you can just kind of feel it coming. The way that he started the Hawaii game, he uh he had a three early, he had 14 first half points, and he's starting to hit a few of the shots that you just expect him to hit.
yeah,
It didn't really continue in the second half, the way that maybe it could have, but I think it's just a matter of time. And he did kind of have a slower start last year. We've alluded to that too. And
right.
then just by the time Atlantis happened, he just kind of took off and had a stretch of huge games in a row. And here's the thing: I mentioned before, we're sixth in the country in offensive efficiency. It's a more efficient team offensively, a higher level offensive team than last year.
Yeah,
And that's with RJ having a really inefficient start shooting the ball.
right, right.
So you don't even have a fully fully operational RJ in the sense that he's like at his highest level.
Right.
So I think that's something to watch for as well. I'd say the other thing, just based on what happened the other night at Hawaii and getting out rebounded the way that they did, is how do they compete on the glass? Dayton, I don't expect them to be, again, with their size. I would expect Carolina to win the rebounding battle, especially because I have to imagine that every minute of the day after that happened on Friday night in the Hawaii game, that Hubert Davis reminded them of this and went back to something he said even back in the media days, which was either we're going to be one of the top rebounding teams in the country or we're going to be in the best shape of our lives. So
Right.
um, I think there's a lot
If
of
that's not a
motivation.
motivator, then I don't know what is.
That's right. And I mean, these guys are all in really good shape, but I don't think anyone wants to run more than they have to.
No.
So that's something that I expect us to come out and attack on the glass. That first half, Jalen Washington did not record a rebound. And that just can't happen for your starting five. Withers had one. He only had one the entire game. Washington was a lot better in the second half. And it's kind of a related thing I want to see from Washington, like both attack the glass, be more physical, compete a little bit, like just be more aggressive, I think, overall.
Yeah.
It's like it takes him getting hit. Almost like you hear about a quarterback or a running back in football where once they get hit the first time, then all of a sudden they're just sort of unleashed for the rest of the game.
Right.
That's kind of what's been happening with him. So I went back and rewatched it because I just on that level.
Yeah. Yeah. We know. The listeners know.
Yeah, I couldn't resist. Anyway, I rewatched it, and there's a point in the second half, like right at the beginning of the second half, that I think everybody will remember where Tanner Christensen, the big guy for Hawaii, who had a really good first half, he had 8 points, 9 rebounds. Right at the beginning, just absolutely discards Jay Wash under the goal. I mean, he just bullies him out of the way and dunks all over him.
Hmm.
That was the moment because right after that, we go right down. Jay Wash scores and has an and
Yep.
one attempt, and
Right.
all of a sudden, it's like he's there. He's being aggressive. He gets 5 rebounds in the second half. He scores 6 points of his eight. So I want to see him be able to bring that into the front end of the game because we're going to need it. And the other piece was that went a little bit unnoticed. Maybe he had a couple of times where he was in position for an offensive rebound and drew a foul. That didn't show up as a
Hmm.
stat, but it
Hmm.
was more just indication of him being in the right position. Where in the first half, he was ball watching, he was out of position, he wasn't. There was at least one box out I saw that he missed, and that's
Right.
kind of across the board. Whether it's technique, whether it's being a little out of position, maybe overhelping on defense, and not being in the right rebounding position. So those are things I just want to see improve. I think those are things that are not related to our size, right? Those are things that are related to more technique, related
Right.
to um, discipline, focus, attention to detail. The size definitely is an issue, and I think there will be games where it shows up and we have to work around it. This will not be one of those games, but I do want to see us clean up some of those details.
Yeah, 100%. I think cleaner game. I mean, that's what the warm-up games are for before the tournament is to really figure out your rhythm. And sometimes it takes an extra game or two in the tournament, which is not ideal. And you might have seen that a little bit from UConn tonight. Like they don't take an L to Memphis 9 games out of 10. So I need to go back and rewatch for that full deep dive. But you saw it in Atlantis last year too. Like the Heels came out struggling pretty slow against Villanova, had to climb back into the second half and force OT. Ultimately, Eric Dixon just dominated, which he looked good again the other night when I was watching them as well. So um, definitely not a rare occurrence from him. But overall,
He's a beast.
he yeah, and they were the broadcasters on that call were like, "Do you think he's a potential NBA player?" And I just yes, I just said yes, absolutely. They're like, yeah, I think I could see it. Yeah, I think so. He's got the body type, he's got the mentality, he's got the skill set, and he's got you know 3-point shot plus interior. So he's just kind of like an overall big build. But yeah, we came out a little slow in Atlantis last year, and I'm just hoping that we don't do that tonight. So what I want to see is a quick start, and then RJ get really locked in. I've got a few bets on some guard play tonight in terms of double-digit scoring. We'll see if it hits. You'll hear from me if it does. You'll hear from me if it is close because I'll be stressed. I'll be texting and you and Badams for sure. Um, but yeah, anything else you want to touch on? The only thing I will say, in addition to all this, is that I hope that UNC can channel a little bit of what the Carolina Hurricanes just channeled because in the time that we've been on, we've scored 3 goals. We're down 3-1 going into the third period and won 6-4. So if we, I hope we don't need a second half like that, but if we do, just channel a little bit of that.
I
Good luck.
like I'm a big fan of the raise up hashtag and the Petey Pablo
All,
video and
all,
intro
all of it.
into the season. So I'm all for that, sort of bring that North Carolina pride and
There
spirit.
you go.
I mean, there's sort of the jokingly, you're going up against Dayton. So you have this who's really first in flight between Ohio and
Right,
North
right,
Carolina. So
always.
that's on the line in this
Right.
game.
Yeah.
Um, I think Seth Trimble has proven that he probably was just how high he gets in the air, and I think he'll show some aerial theatrics tonight as well.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, I guess the other thing that stood out to me from the Hawaii game that was a real positive, I think we can build on moving forward, is that, and I don't know that everybody agrees with me on this, and that's okay. The way I saw it was that I thought we executed pretty well against the zone, especially compared to that first game against Elon, where they went zone, and it looked like we didn't know what to do or how to respond.
Right.
We had several set plays that Hubert had drawn up that were pretty effective, and we had whether it was Jay Witt on a cut that was really nice with. I really
Mm.
like Jalen Washington in the middle of the zone just because of his height and his ability to shoot it in that mid range.
Yeah.
He didn't use that, but I think that's something that we can go back to. And he's a better passer than maybe he's shown or had the opportunity to show. So he had a really nice assist to Jay Witt for a baseline finish. Elliott, sometimes they put him in there to be the facilitator. Other times we ran a couple of the backdoor lobs as well. So we had some nice sets out of the zone. I
Mm.
thought the execution was better. I think the other thing that can be a zone breaker is RJ Davis and Ian Jackson, who saw kind of at
Yeah.
the
I
end of the
was gonna
first
say, let's
half
get the
where
freshman some time. Ian continues to shine.
he's got to get more time. He's got to
Yeah.
get more minutes. And I pick on Hubert a little bit. He has a tendency to tighten his rotations in the second half. We've kind of seen this
This
just
is
over the
gonna, yeah,
last
this has been a several
4
weeks.
years. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tendency. And so Ian will get, granted, this game, Elliott was in foul trouble, so he had to get more time.
Right.
But second half, his minutes start to dwindle. And I'm looking at it, and it's like there's still a few minutes that you could have shaved off RJ's total time just to keep his legs fresh. Not
Yeah.
for any reason that, you need to take RJ out. It's more like we don't need him to play in these games 34 or 37 minutes. He could play probably like 30 minutes,
Yeah.
and that's 4 or 5 more minutes for Ian Jackson, who he had some really nice moments
Hmm.
in this game. And one of them was at the end of the first half. We were kind of stagnant and just kind of passing the ball around the perimeter. But this is something I even saw this summer where RJ would defer to Ian and kind of like, how you're playing and you without just with your body language, like that next pass is, hey, you're going to shoot this one.
Hmm.
That's what this was without them even having to say anything or really
Yeah.
like you could
Yeah.
just feel, well, that and Ian Jackson's over there, like, give me the ball back. I'm going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
rip
He's
it.
like, I'm a shooter,
And
shoot. I'm a shooter.
yeah, and he's low volume, but he's I think he's 4 of 7 from three so
Yeah,
far this
I've
year.
been
So he's
impressed.
he's
Yeah,
shoot, shooting it
not
well. I want
often
to
you
see
see
him.
those freshmen come in and always hit. Sometimes it's a little bit
No,
of a struggle. So he's ready.
especially at Carolina. So yeah, so for him to be locked in, and again, a big stage for Ian Jackson is kind of what he's built for.
Yeah,
So I want to see him get some opportunities. But I was excited to see the possession before that. RJ ripped one. So
right.
I think like yes, you can look at execution against the zone, which I thought was better in terms of our executing the sets. But then you just have guys who can be zone breakers. Not
Yeah,
to mention that Elliott just broke the zone by himself at least once. I mean, he was just
that's yeah,
ridiculous. And 7 of 7 finishing at the rim. That was not happening last year. You can see just the time that
yeah,
he's put in terms of working on his angles, but also his strength and balance and all of those things. Um, so yeah, I mean, to me, there's a lot of positives. I guess the last thing was in the first half, we really struggled with the interior defense. And so we made some adjustments, which I think is the way to go going forward, which is, and you were calling for this even last year against Eric Dixon in the Bahamas, was let's dig down with our guards. Let's
yeah,
let's go and do a quick dig down or quick double, try to get a steal, at least, at least give some pressure there.
yeah,
That was really effective in the second half, ripping the ball out,
mhm,
speeding those guys up. And
yeah,
that was part of being able to protect the paint. I mean, Hawaii hit some shots in the second half that kept them in it. They were 6 of 9 from three, but the way they shot it before that game coming in under 30% as a team, you'll live with that. And
yeah.
you'd much rather that than them get easy shots at the rim, which was happening in the first half. So I was
Right.
happy with the adjustments from the rebounding perspective, adjustments against the zone, and then that last piece, the adjustments defensively on the interior, just knowing that we don't have the same level of rim protection, you're going to have to do it a little bit differently than we have in the past.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what Elliott can do tonight. He's just been absolutely carving up the defense, getting to the bucket, and like you mentioned, he's been really strong finishing. 707 is great. He was drawing the fouls last year and getting to the bucket, but he wasn't always getting that
Yeah.
extra and one. So that's been huge to see. So I think that's going to be another big factor. I'd like to see us really just out rebound the heck out of Dayton, given the size.
Yeah.
Being that it's similar. We're not going to be a huge team, but facing a team that's a little bit smaller, there's no reason that the way Hubert's coaching these guys and what he teaches at UNC shouldn't just be able to crash the boards and make sure you out rebound this team and get your team the opportunity to get those second chances. So second chance kicks to RJ or Cade for an extra 3-pointer. Maybe pad those stats a little bit. And I think I'm hoping it'll be a little bit more of a runaway than RJ's 30 points and a 1 to 2 point victory that I bet on. But I feel good about it. Excited to lock in. Might need to grab a Red Bull and have that be our drink of choice on today's episode.
I like it. I mean, um, I did some research on that too. There's a microbrewery actually at the University of Hawaii. I
Oh,
think it's called the Beer Lab, and they had a couple of good ones on tap. Oh man, there was one that I found because I always try to find one that has something to do
yeah,
with
you have a little
basketball
fun
or the
with it.
game.
Yeah,
I can't remember what it was now, but anyway, so love that one. The university has like their
yeah,
own microbrewery. That's pretty cool.
yeah,
Um, anyway, yeah, I think in terms of the tournament going forward, Carolina really needs to. And we said this last year about Atlantis. They need to win 2 out of 3 of these games,
yeah,
and ideally, you need to get one against a high level opponent who's probably going to be a more of like a quad one win at the end of the year.
yeah.
It's possible Dayton could be. They're in the high 30s right now in Ken Palm. So this is a good team. It's one of the best mid majors in the country, right up there with Memphis right now.
Hmm.
I don't count Gonzaga anymore. I think they've earned the right as a high major program who's in a low major league.
Yeah,
Um, but between Memphis and Dayton, those are some really solid programs with a lot of
yeah,
history. So this is not going to be an easy game, but I agree. I think I'd like to see us come out and make a statement. I'm not talking
yeah.
about like a
Agreed.
blowout, but like a comfortable 10 to 15 point win would be something to really build on.
Yeah,
And
and
then
where
you
you're
go and
not crawling from behind. Like, let's get
yeah,
out early and make this like a statement game where you have the lead 90% of the time, if not the entire time.
yeah, I think so. A wire to wire win would definitely be something that would be a good way to jumpstart us into the rest of the tournament. And that
Yeah.
because tomorrow, no matter who you play tomorrow,
It's
It's
top five.
it's going to be a dogfight. That's
Yeah,
exactly right. You have the fourth
yeah,
and fifth best teams in the country. There's an argument made for both of these teams that we're so early in the season that either of them could be the best team in the country.
yep,
Iowa State just doesn't have the same level of brand recognition or star power that Auburn has been able to develop, especially with Janai Broome. But they are a drag you in the mud and just knock you down type of defense.
yeah,
And I was listening to Sherelle McMillan on Inside Carolina's one of their podcasts talking about how they just suffocate you on defense,
yep.
and it made me think of the movie Hustle that we both
I
really
love it.
enjoyed, and
Yeah.
Bo Cruz being the boa and
Oh,
just kind of
yeah,
sucking the life out of you on
yeah,
defense. That's kind of what they do. It's really frustrating to play against.
yep.
They're up significantly here in this first half. They're kind of doing to Auburn right now.
And they also
And
have some offense. They scored 49 in the first half.
yeah, and so that's not what they're known for. But they,
Yeah,
they are top five in defensive efficiency, but they're not as high in offense, although they've ticked up a little bit. And they have guys like
that's
Taman Lipsey and
yeah,
Sean Gilbert who lead the way for them. So they're tough. If it is Iowa State, it's not a fun team to play against. It's a little bit like going to the dentist for 2 hours in the basketball version of that. As a Carolina fan, is that you want to get up and down, and so it is a contrast of styles. And we owe them one, as we talked about. We owe them a couple from the tournament, like you mentioned, several years ago, but also from Portland 2 years ago, where they forced us into some unforced errors, just kind of like speeding us up, but also we made some mistakes down the end of that game where we had that game. And so I'd be very interested to watch. I think it's going to take a lot of toughness, a lot of mental toughness as well to stick with and be resilient against an Iowa State team that just keeps coming at you on the defensive end.
yeah, 100%. So focus on this game, and then we got at least a top five matchup coming up. But we're gonna go ahead and wrap up this episode mainly because it's 10 o'clock and I have an hour and a half to edit. So we're gonna crank it out before the tip off here at 11:30. Get that out to y'all for a little preview. But just do want to give a quick point out. We haven't discussed this, but I just want to point out to Bill Walton. Miss him on the calls.
Yeah.
I know, he was just such a spirit of Maui in this whole tournament. It's been nice to see the tributes, and we're always thinking of Bill and his family, and that's like again it's the core of our friendship and listening to him late nights and as you tweeted out earlier, so thank you for our lives. That's it.
Yeah, this is one of his quotes that he would say
Oh,
all the
dude,
time. And
it works. Yeah,
I mean, thank you to him just for everything that he brought in so many facets of his life. He was a fascinating person,
agreed.
but
Yeah,
also just made impacts in so many ways, beyond just certainly being such a talented basketball player and then a really entertaining commentator.
yeah,
Very much an activist in many ways, and appreciate
yeah,
that about him too.
for sure.
Uh, but just the joy that he would bring, just the like, no matter what's going on, you could have had a really long day like today, right? And you listen to Bill, and you just forget about I mean, you forget about everything that's happened because you're trying to make sense of what he's talking about,
Yeah,
for one. But it's just
just kind of
entertaining, and he's just
refreshing. Yeah,
having the best time. And whether it's Jason Benetti or Pash or Schulman trying to stay on their toes and figure out
yeah,
how to direct him and how to rein this in, it
yeah.
was all part of the experience.
Yeah, and during the chaos, of the last, however many years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it's been that he's been on, he's always kind of a steadfast escape to just go listen to and not have to worry about anything else. So the tributes are nice, and Bill will always live on in that tournament. So won't be quite the same, but looking forward to seeing Carolina take on Dayton. Not looking forward to the 11:30 game after the 12:30 game, followed by a late night one potentially tomorrow. We'll see how it all shapes up.
I've got one quick parallel for you. I'm doing this at the end because this is probably completely off the rails. So we're just going to
If
see
you've
where it
made it
goes.
this far, then you're sticking around. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we had the summer of Barbenheimer, right? Like two summers ago.
Yeah.
So now Wicked is like the big movie of the Thanksgiving holiday season, finally having the motion picture version of the Broadway play. I couldn't help but notice, you look at this Maui bracket, look at these teams on our side of the bracket. This is more Wizard of Oz than it is Wicked, but we've got the Cyclones, right? With Iowa State, we've got the Flyers. You think
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
witches on the broomsticks and stuff. You don't have any lions or bears, but you got tigers. You got
If,
Auburn
if
Tigers.
only Baylor was here.
Right. We need Baylor. And then on the other side of the bracket, you've got one of the arguably the best tacticians in college basketball, Danny Hurley, the wizard, right, of X and O's. Um, and then we already talked about the fact that Seth Trimble defies gravity. So I think we're there, man.
Hey,
So this is, we had Barbenheimer. Now we've got Maui Wicked
got
for
a wicked
this
tournament ahead of
November.
us. Yeah. God, you've gone too deep. You need to lay off the college basketball.
I have a basketball problem. This is well established, and this podcast just every week just confirms that it is a real problem.
I'm here. I'm here for the problem, for whatever that's worth, as a true supportive friend. Good being on with you. I'm glad we got to get this preview in. I'm gonna go edit because we got an hour and a half till game time. I'm also gonna get that Red Bull, but appreciate y'all listening today. Again, we're back every week throughout the season, so thanks for tuning in. We are on YouTube and on X and on Blue Sky for all few of you over there so far. Keep checking us out on all the platforms, and until next time, in about an hour and a half, I'll just say go Heels.
Go Heels.